Hey everyone, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 536, being recorded on Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. I'm Jim Tannis.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Sebastian Peak.
And we're glad you're with us. And if you're an on-demand listener, it's not been that long since the last show. That's because we had a little bit of an issue with the last podcast. We recorded a day late just due to some travel issues, so it was already kind of delayed. And then I went to edit it, and I apologize if you can hear some meowing in the background. My wife forgot to close the basement door again, and one of the cats is again attacking my leg. Apologize for the wincing. But, or was I? Oh yeah, so we recorded the show. I went to go edit it on my Mac, because that's how I roll. And we store all of our videos in, or I edit in Final Cut. I store the videos on a Promise Pegasus Thunderbolt RAID array. I've been doing it for a long time now, even for other projects besides this. And I edited the podcast as normal, went to export it, and it crashed on the export. And all the rendered file and the project file was corrupted. But I keep backups, so no problem. Restored to the backup, did it again, same thing. Happened, I think, one more time after that, and then at that point I was getting frustrated, so I said I'm just going to pull all this out, going to go to Premiere and just do an edit in Premiere. And at that point the array started throwing up errors. It has a little utility that runs, it's supposed to talk about or remind you of data integrity. It started throwing up errors. I couldn't access other data on the array, and then right in front of me it all just kind of failed. So it was like dying as I was doing this, unbeknownst to me, and then it just kind of crapped out entirely. But thankfully, I was able to run some data recovery. Software Promise has some data recovery utilities. I was able to get it all pulled off to a network array. It took like 30 hours to do the verification and all that. And then I had to restore everything. But that restore was everything up to the edit. So then I re-edited the whole thing and then republished it, or published it, I guess, for the first time. So I didn't go up until like Monday morning. It was a fun weekend.
So it's kind of like a toddler. Right? You know, your kid's running around, he's looking fine, and then he looks at you and says, my throat hurts. And then he just throws up everywhere.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
If you've ever had kids, you probably realize that, Dad, I don't feel good.
And there it goes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Duck and cover.
Or when they don't even give you any kind of warning at all, and it just happens all over themselves.
They just make eye contact, open their mouth, and
Yep.
Yeah.
But I don't know about your kids. Mine is pretty resilient when it comes to that, though, because he can puke his guts out and be fine, ready to roll. Let's go get that ice cream, Dad. Come on. So
he's going to have a great time in college.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, wow, this is not boding well for his future if he's resilient in that way. But
got the cast iron stomach,
making some room.
Mm-hmm. But we're glad you're with us, and we're back this week. It's a lighter week, both because of the delay on the initial recording of last week and just not having any major products launched thus far this week. So we do have a couple reviews, and we have one review we're going to go to in post right now. We can't talk about it just yet, so if you're listening on demand, you're going to hear a review right now, and then we'll be back after that. But if you're live with us, we're going to jump straight to the second review. And as we alluded to, what we want to talk about first here is a new graphics card. You may have heard it rumored. We've had some rumblings that this was coming, and sure enough, it's true. The NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1660, not TI, just 1660. It's here. It's real. Sebastian's got a couple cards to talk about with us, so why don't you take it over there, Sebastian?
Thanks, Jim. You know, it's deja vu all over again here at the PC Perspective offices as cards from EVGA and MSI made their way here. And this is, on the face of it, this is kind of like the 1660 Ti launch all over again, if you look at our review of that card. But when you look a little bit closer, even though this is based on the same TU116 GPU, and slightly cut down, like this has 2 SMs disabled, so you're down a total of 128 CUDA cores with the non-TI version of the GTX 1660. But the big difference is that though it's still a 6 gigabyte card, and this is another one of those add-in board only launches where it's just partner cards, there's no reference card, it's GDDR5 memory. instead of GDDR6. So the memory bandwidth is actually the memory bandwidth, and the total amount of VRAM is the same as the GTX 1060 6GB. So the advantage of this over a 1060 is going to be significantly lessened compared to what we saw, those huge gains we saw with the 1660 Ti, which was up to 50% faster than a 1060. So I think NVIDIA's number on this was about 15% faster than a 1060. It's being launched at $219. So if you're looking for a reference, like the 249 was the launch price of the 1060 3GB model, and 299 was the launch of the 6GB model. So here we are, almost 2 years later, and we have a card that has better performance than a 1060, costs less at launch, although 1060s have been selling for, for the 6GB model, which has always been a lot more expensive, still around 219 to 229. And I imagine that as the channel kind of dries up with Pascal cards, that eventually this will just straight up replace the 1060 as far as the price point. And we kind of thought, like I thought when the 1660 Ti launched, like this is kind of the drop-in replacement for the 1060. Well, really, the non-Ti version is it right down to the same memory interface, similar pricing to what we're currently seeing those cards sell for, like I just said. So I don't know. What do you guys think about a theoretical, we'll get into performance in a moment, but a theoretical 15-ish% average bump in performance this far down the road for a card that is just going to kind of drop in and replace a 1060 as the supply of Pascal cards just kind of dries up?
I think it's a positive development. I mean, it's not, it's not a super home run. We talked about pretty extensively about the price point of the 1660 Ti. And even though you don't get the RTX features, it still is, pretty good price for what you get in terms of performance. There's a new card, and this is just another example of slowly the pressure of pushing performance down to these price points is a nice change. They kind of had to do something because I think AMD really, even though they don't sell as many cards, they put a lot of pressure on them with the RX 580 and especially the RX 570. I mean, I saw one on sale for the 8 gig version for $139, and it comes with 2 free games. I mean, that's really, really hard to beat, but NVIDIA still is using their slightly better position, well, not slightly better, but significantly better market position to be able to still make a little bit more money. They got the reputation of having better drivers, even though that has really dissipated as a positive for them over the past couple of years. AMD has done a lot better job. But yeah, it's. I mean, we needed some more new blood in this area. Sure, it's not RTX, but it's another option that is, a little bit more cost effective.
Yeah, our RTX at this price point makes 0 sense, just as it's debatable even at the 349 price point with the 2060. So at that point, it's just like a DLSS or bust kind of a thing. And then, of course, we can go down the rabbit hole of like DLSS at this point, early days, image quality concerns, all that kind of stuff that have come up. So it's not the most popular topic. And I think that do you find like this, now we have 2 GTX cards that have launched. And I think it made sense when we saw the 1660 launch as a Ti that we would see the non-Ti, kind of that vanilla card to fill a missing part of the segment as the 1060 leaves. But GTX cards, they're back. We went to RTX, we're back to GTX for mainstream, which I don't know if that was your strategy all along. I assume that there was going to be a non-ray traced card regardless of how well the RTX cards sold or what the adoption of like the 2060 was going to be. But we just look at price points, like Josh is saying, this fills in a position in the product stack. Like they're working from the top down, and They started high with the 699 2080, and the 2070 sits at around $500 if you can find one for the MSRP. And then the 2060 comes out at $349, and then you had kind of a void that was being filled with remnants of Pascal, which then you had the 1660 Ti comes out, which is about a 1070 as far as the level of performance. And this comes out, which is just a bit below that. And if you're looking at performance numbers, this is faster than like from AMD, like the RX 590. And actually our sample of the 590, the XFX Fat Boy, is an overclocked, a factory overclocked 590. So a little bit better still. But this consistently was above the 590, and at least in 1080p testing was above the older GTX 980 Ti. So you're thinking about a card that 2 years later is beating out a 980 Ti. That's pretty impressive, especially for all those people who are either on a 900 series card or maybe even on a 700 series card. Thinking about upgrading, say you're on a 780, this $219 card is going to give you better performance than a 980 Ti, at least at 1080p. So,
and double the amount of memory.
Yeah, actually, the 980 Ti.
No, that's 4. No, 6, wasn't it?
6. It was 6.
Yeah,
Six,
it was
yeah, but
6.
I'm talking about the 780. 780 was 3 gigs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. Yeah, if you're on a 6 or 700 series card, then this gets you way more VRAM and better performance than all but the very highest end, like the 980 Ti will beat this at when I was doing 1440p high game tests. It did not always come out on top. It was neck and neck with the 980 Ti for the most part. But I mean, if we just look at gains over the 1066 gigabyte, which is the obvious, this is the obvious successor to that card. The worst case scenario is Ashes of Singularity, everybody's favorite GPU benchmark, where it was only about a 2.5% increase over the GTX 1066 gigabyte. And that was kind of an outlier, because then I saw like the gains went up to 17% with Far Cry 5 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, 23%, kind of mid 20s, like 27% with going back down to older like DX11 titles like F1 2018. So the average of about 15% is fair. It might be a little bit higher than that at 1080, at least under the settings, the way that I tested the games. But moving up to 1440, it was kind of the same thing. What was interesting though, because I did all the stock testing with the EVGA card, and EVGA once again sent one of their compact but triple slot cards, the XC Black, which is a totally stock card. And stock for this is a boost clock of, I believe it's 1785 megahertz. MSI sent, once again, their Gaming X card, which is their highest end version. And the Gaming X is factory overclocked by about it's 75 megahertz. And so that provides an 1860 megahertz boost. But whereas the EVGA card has a locked power limit of 100%, the MSI card has a power limit of 107%. The reason this matters is just as I found that the GTX 1660 Ti overclocked very well, this 1660 overclocks very, very well. It seemed like there's just a little bit more headroom, at least with my samples. And I had fun overclocking this MSR Gaming X card, which has a custom PCB, beefier power delivery, that 107% power limit to play with. And I was able to actually exceed the performance of a 1660 Ti with this card. And not just any 1660 Ti, the higher end MSI Gaming X 1660 Ti, which is factory overclocked. So depending on the game, it was either neck and neck with or even exceeding the performance of that 1660 Ti when overclocked. The settings that I used are in the review. I think it was a plus 150 megahertz core clock and like 400 megahertz overclock on the memory. And you were not going to be able to overclock the memory on these cards as far and as easily as I could with the Ti, because GDDR6 just seems to really overclock well.
Mhm.
Like pushing in an extra gigahertz seems no problem. and I had it up to 14 gigabit per second to match the 2060 easily. This a different story, where you're never going to hit anywhere near the memory bandwidth numbers we see with the Ti or with the RX or the RTX 2060. So still, I mean, the MSI card in the review, $249, which is going to be kind of on the high end of a vanilla 1660, but tremendous overclocking potential with the card. So I think that kind of changes the story a lot, where I'm not that enthusiastic talking about, well, it kind of drops in as a replacement to the 1060, and it's a little bit less money, a little bit better performance. But then you can just overclock the snot out of this TU116 GPU. It seems to just be made for it, where maybe the performance is kind of artificially limited. Like even the stock EVGA card easily hits much higher clocks. It'll sustain, because of that power limit, the sustained boost speeds drop below 2 gigahertz. But with the MSI card, they're always above 2 gigahertz. So, and if you look at the charts on the overclocked results page, you see it jumping up like 2 and even 3 positions up on the chart. Like, it's just significant performance improvement for free if you buy a card that is designed to be overclocked like this MSI card is. So I don't know. Does that change the equation for you? Like when you're at $249, that's obviously just $30 away from moving up to a vanilla 1660 Ti at $279. But it does seem to sort of maintain that segmentation where you have, here's the card for $30 more. It's this level of performance, and you can overclock it. And then for $30 more than that, you're moving up to the next card in the stack. So at least down here with these 1660 series cards, they have it nicely spaced out.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're going to go for an overclocked 1660 Ti, then again, you're going to be paying about $30 or $40 extra on top of the MSRP for the basic model. So it is a really nice segmentation for those that, they just either don't have or don't want to invest, $350, $500 into a brand new GPU, but they've got one that's, it's getting old and noisy, it's getting old and dying. There's a couple of new inputs that they'd much rather have on some of these models than they've got on like an old 970 or something. So yeah, all of a sudden at $220, you are able to pick something up, and if you're willing to put a bit of work into it, you can push it up to about the performance of something you'd pay $280 for, which, used to be the way you did things. It's kind of fun. And it's a good thing that DDR4 is so expensive, so we're not going to see a DDR4 model of this card competing with it, like we used to back in the day.
Yeah, when there was always the DDR3, like the cheaper versions of cards. Yeah, and on the last page of the review, you can see actually the result just using OC Scanner, using EVGA's Precision X1 tool with their totally bone stock card. The resulting score was plus 143, and while GPU clocks go in 15 megahertz increments, so I would be on the safe side, I would do like a plus 135 there on the core of that card. That's still a very healthy overclock, like 135 megahertz for free, and a cooler that can sustain it, because this EVGA cooler is very thick and wasn't even loud. Like that was another thing. These cards, at least these partner cards, both very quiet, like 35-ish, 34, 35 decibels under load. The MSI card has a 0 RPM fan, so you can't even hear it when it's at idle. So as we saw with the 1660 Ti, and a lot of this obviously is going to depend on the board partner, how they designed the card, what they decided to put into it, what kind of power limit is there, and that sort of thing. But one interesting thing I didn't mention, though, even though this is a very low power draw GPU, like lower power draw than a 1060, the lowest two results on the chart, still has an 8-pin power connector as a requirement. It's like all of the power is coming from PCIe. It's like they're not using slot power at all. I'm not sure. But hey, it
well, why bother
does
making
open up
6-pin connectors anymore? Everything's using an 8-pin. Why put a second process out there to attach a 6-pin to it?
I know there were some complaints when the 1660 Ti launched, and I had somebody asking me about that. requirement and how it wasn't truly a mainstream card because it still required an 8-pin, and there are going to be problems with people with older power supplies. I will say that even the $25 to $30-ish EVGA power supply I always end up buying for somebody's like budget build when I'm helping somebody out or building a computer. That's
You don't have a pair of
got
6+2s.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know of any modern power supply that does not have an 8-pin anymore, even if it's only like a 400-watt power supply. So, but this thing, like my total draw from the wall under load was like 182 to 186 watts. And that's a system with a Core i7-8700K and, 16 gigs of overclocked RAM. And so you have a lot. Yeah, it sips power. It's 120 watt TDP, but you can exceed that when you overclock. I mean, I got this way up into the 200s. I need to add that to the review, what my total draw was under the heaviest overclock. But anyway, I mean, it like Josh said, it fills a spot in the product stack. It's logical, like I said, with the 1660 Ti launch. I think it gets a lot more interesting when you overclock. And they had mentioned to us that the TU116 was going to be really overclocking friendly, and it certainly is. So it seems like they could have pushed more out of this than the 1785 default boost clock, but that's up to board partners. And I'm sure most of the cards we will see will be overclocked to some extent, whether they charge more for it or not. Any final thoughts about this new GPU?
Are the cards that you reviewed, are they available day one, shipping to consumers?
Should be, yeah. If it follows the 1660 Ti launch, I had live links later that morning, so it wasn't immediate. And by the time you're hearing this or watching this, they're likely already out there, and product links for these will be on the review. So I was not told anything other than these would be available immediately.
All right.
Cool. Moving along.
So we're back after that and back on with the show. And we have a review of the Corsair Crystal Series 680X. It's an RGB case. Sebastian took a look at it for us. And why don't you tell us about this really nice looking case here?
Well, it is very big and heavy, and it's sitting right over here, and I'm contemplating bringing it over to the desk with me. But this is, right off the bat, I will say, one in the last 5 years, it is one of the most expensive cases that we've reviewed here. So if you just accept that at the outset, this is a $250 enclosure, which is, kind of ridiculous. But if you accept this as a very, very high-end premium thing and then move on from there, this has outstanding build quality, really intelligent design, just things like the way that it looks aside, because tastes vary, of course. I was really into the styling where it has the glass on the front, the top, the one side panel. The Crystal series from Corsair is all about glass, so tempered glass everywhere. This is very lightly tinted glass, almost clear, so it has a little bit more of a fresh appearance than some of the previous cases. I've reviewed the Crystal Series 570X and 460X and 280X in the past. This is actually closest to that 280X, which is a dual chamber micro ATX case. This is a full ATX and eATX case, still a dual chamber design. If you remember way back to 2013, Corsair had the Air 540, which was similarly sized to this and a big dual chamber case. And what that means is there's basically a full ATX enclosure on one side, and then the power supply, storage, and all of your cable management and stuff is behind that in a second chamber that's only a little bit smaller. So you have a tremendous amount of room for your build, and it's just cavernous. So you can, like my build with a standard ATX motherboard, left more than half the case empty. Like it felt like the case was almost unfinished. Like my build almost felt unfinished, but I'm like, that's it. I mean, you have so much room for cable management in a case like this that it's kind of staggering. But all that aside, like the RGB nature of this, it's 3 RGB fans that come shipped with it. There is an RGB controller built into the back of it. various Corsair IQ enabled devices can all be synchronized with this. So literally like your keyboard and mouse on your desk could be synchronized with the case fans. And these are not just like your standard lit up case fans where there's like a lighting element to make them all one color. Like that 280X that we reviewed, there are, I believe it's 16 lighting elements inside of each fan that are all individually addressable. So you can go nuts with customization of the lighting zones and patterns and all that sort of thing if you want to using the software. I didn't get too far into that. I played around with that a little bit with 280X last year, but in the end, I didn't find anything to fault the case other than the price. So it's just one of those things. Like if you've got $250 to spend on a case, it comes in a white, which is white inside as well as outside, or a black enclosure, and the two things you need are the budget for this and the space, because it occupies a lot of space. So if it's down below the desk, that's probably less of an issue, but I don't know why you'd spend this much on a case with these kind of aesthetics if you were putting it down and out of sight. But and if you're watching the video, you're seeing some charts as far as the performance of the case, and this is something that for the last 5 years I've been comparing groups of cases against each other. I've been out of the case review game for a little while now, and getting back into it with a new test platform, I don't have that comparative data. So you can just see kind of for your reference that very, very quiet at idle. 32.4 decibels is very quiet. It was barely above room noise. And then I was using a fairly quiet build in this, so it didn't really get very loud. The loudest number was around 34 decibels with the CPU fan. But the front cases, the front case fans are only spinning around 500 RPM. So very quiet throughout my testing, just with standard fan profiles with the Gigabyte motherboard I was using. So
were your insulation R ratings were getting lower than what you wanted them to be, so you started doing cases again?
I have it's alarming how many cases I have, and I'm thinking about all the cases that like we gave away in past contests, or I was finally just like asking anybody I knew, like, do you need a case? Are you building a computer? Are you considered upgrading the case that you have? And gave cases out to family members and stuff. And I think I probably still have an alarming number. That's like 40 or 50 cases probably that
Good
line
Lord.
my attic. So yeah, I have blocked out of my mind. I honestly cannot tell you how many cases I reviewed in a 4-year span, but it was quite a few. But of those, this is one of the better ones that I've reviewed. They did little things right, like the gaps that you absolutely have to have when you're using tempered glass. There are sufficient air gaps for good airflow. They use really quiet front fans, which can be problematic, especially when you don't have enough of a gap, and they can spin really loud and kind of get choked out. And none of that was a problem. They did kind of some clever things with filters. Yeah.
Or the magnetic? Nice.
Yes. Not only that, it's actually, I should have mentioned this. The filters are magnetic, but they attach to removable fan brackets. The front bracket comes out with 2 captured thumb screws. The top bracket comes out with 2 captured thumb screws. And when you pull the bracket out, the filter is just magnetically attached. You just kind of peel it off, rinse it off or vacuum it out, and then pop it back in. And the brackets went in with all the fans and everything attached far more easily than I thought they were going to. So
you don't have to half crawl into the case to try and install that fan with the dampening material.
No.
That's not a bad idea at all.
Yeah, they did some clever things. Like you'd have to actually handle the case yourself. I have some close-up pictures so you can kind of see, but some of the touches, like the way the fan screens, like the filters go into the bracket where it's flush with the top of the bracket, so the whole thing goes in, and there's absolutely no like play, and everything is. I think there was enough in the way of vibration reduction and that sort of thing to help keep it as quiet as it was. Like hard drives all have rubber mounts against the sides of them when you put them into the tool-free trays and all that sort of thing. So you're definitely getting a lot of quality and a lot of little details, but again, you're paying a very steep premium for all of that. Like there are plenty of really, really great cases in the $100 to $150 range, and a lot of
have
people
optical drives.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. I mean, you have to be over optical drives at this point. A lot of these premium cases come out and it's just like a blank front panel. No, I'm in the camp where I still find it valid to have optical drives, and I know people who will not use a case that doesn't have 5.25-inch drive bays. Like I could just
God, I
take a
still
poll
haven't
right
even
here.
I haven't even ripped like 95% of the CDs I own. I'm so lazy. Gotta have the optical drive.
You do have the optical drive.
I got two.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're supposed to.
Here?
One in each.
So do you have optical drives in your current build, Jeremy?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I don't, but I use a external Blu-ray drive for everything. But
yeah, I have two of them in there because I was thinking, and I still do. I rip a lot of media, especially the UHD Blu-ray discs. Once that finally got cracked, I had a whole stack of those, and I went with a.
Not that we condone this behavior.
No, I own the discs. I have them.
As you mentioned earlier, he likes backups.
Well, that's true.
Just a backup.
Yes, I'm not letting my son touch those $30, $40 a piece discs. But the issue I faced is I went with a bigger case. I went with a Fantex. I think it was N Lux big tower case. It had like 5.25 bays, and I put my two Blu-ray drives in there. And I'm regretting it because I did use those optical drives for a while, and I still will use them in the future. But I don't use them every day. I maybe use them once a month. And so if I could have had, and I have this giant case here. And before the show started, I was having USB problems, and I'm trying to like check my USB connections, and I got to move this giant heavy thing around. If I could have gone for a smaller case and just used an external when I needed it, I would have done that in hindsight. So I love optical media. I don't think it's dead, but I think even most of the most ardent optical defenders don't use it as frequently as they used to. So there is a point to going for something smaller and going external when you need it.
Yeah, but I got rid of my 3.5-inch drive in like 2007.
Right.
The floppy.
Yeah, and you can still get an external one if you ever needed it.
Well, you know what's in reach, of course.
There you go.
Is that a Microsoft floppy disk?
Turn it around. I want to see what the label said.
Mavis Beacon.
It's an old SIS video card.
Oh, but you put a BIOS on it. Okay.
I did. I flashed. You don't even want to know the crap that I have in here, including, oh my gosh. Okay, my wife must have put this in here.
Hanson?
Oh
no!
It's a single.
It's single.
Oh, well, I don't know. I have no idea where that came from.
Jim, that needs to be like bleeped out and obscured on the video.
Yeah,
protect Josh.
We are a family show.
That's you shouldn't show. You shouldn't pull something like that out and show it on the video stream.
No.
But I also wanted to say too, with this case, and I haven't gotten to see it in person, but just going off Sebastian's amazing photography.
You just go ahead and keep talking while I grab it.
Okay. The issue was I had an Air 540 and I loved that case, and I love these dual chamber cases because I suck at cable management. Like the only times I've ever done really nice cable management is when I planned out in advance the lengths I needed and went to Cable Mod and ordered the exact lengths and all that. When I have standard cables, I just can't do good management. And so I had the Air 540. I used it for a long time. The look got dated. Some of the features got dated. And the Air 740, was it? Their successor to that came out a couple years ago, just didn't look good. It just had like sort of a curved, aggressive slot look to it. And but this looks pretty slick. And
leave it to the Mac
that looks
owner
like a mini fridge.
Leave it to the Macintosh owner, Jim, to talk about aesthetics.
Yeah.
With cases. But yes, this is
two systems in there.
Yeah, it's literally the size of some of those cases we've seen where there's like a mini ITX board on one side and an ATX build on the other side. But I mean, it's once you get it where you want it, and I would not advocate like moving it around, but it's got a nice hinge door.
Oh, that is a nice hinge. Wow, that just pops right out.
Well, that's well done.
You put a single screw I forgot to put back in to keep the door on, otherwise it just slips right off. So That made like building in the case a lot easier because I could just like literally throw the door off to the side.
I'm getting a
throwing
serious
is the key with tempered glass.
I'm getting a serious Home Shopping Network vibe here.
Yeah.
Can you stroke it for us, please?
Yeah. Now we've got 12 left, folks, and if you want
There
that
we
easy
go.
pay, you got to call now.
Just 5 payments on Easy Pay. It's so easy to own. Free shipping, of course. And if you put it on your QVC credit card, then you get $10 off your next purchase at QVC.
And a ShamWow to keep it shiny.
Dude, that really like looks like a wine cooler, or not a wine, but you know, one of those wine refrigerators.
And I will say, like,
that's
filters
nuts.
everywhere. Like, it's always magnetic wherever. This is the intake for the power supply. So anywhere that you have a filter, I'll just take the side panel off here. The only standard steel side panel is, of course, the back one. And then you just have a ridiculous amount of room. Look how deep this rear chamber is. Like,
Yeah, I got a 5-liter reservoir in the back of my system.
and you've definitely got mounting for it if you wanted to do that.
Does the front glass come off?
I don't think so. No, I didn't see a way to get it off. They have it. You'd have to disassemble the front of the case to get it out of there. But like I said, air gaps and stuff with this are very good. There's lots of air intake, even if you can't take the panel out. And then, of course, the front filter is accessed from the inside by taking the fans out, which come out with a couple of thumb screws, which, of course, now everything's falling apart. This is live TV, folks. Or if you're listening, none of this makes any sense at all. And why am I doing this? But anyhow, we don't have to talk about this case all night, but I wanted to show it since it was right.
So heavy.
I'm just waiting for the
Sure,
crash.
You buy hernia belts.
Okay.
I probably could use an upgrade on my main computer. I've only had this one for 8 years. One of the Corsair Obsidian 750Ds, I think.
That's a classic.
Still a good case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suits my needs. Mostly. Anyway.
All right. Well, any other comments on that case? Nope. All right.
No.
I think that kid could fit in it, but apart from that,
So that's the Corsair Crystal Series 680X. Is it shipping now, Sebastian?
It is. It's on Corsair's website, and I'll have to check around to see if it's. I'm sure it's already on Amazon anyway.
All right.
I'll have to
But,
update
so
product links on this review.
a nice case, but pricey. $250 MSRP.
Yes.
All right. Next up, we've got some interesting news. There was a bit of a surprise move in the GPU/interconnect enterprise interconnect networking environment this week. NVIDIA acquired Mellanox, and Josh was able to draw on his years of experience and write up a story for us about what happened here, what it means, and why don't you tell us your thoughts, Josh?
NVIDIA bought Mellanox. Ta-da!
But why?
Oh, you want more detail?
Just a little
Gosh,
bit.
dang, yeah.
Just a little bit.
Okay, so, NVIDIA has not been shy about buying other companies, but unfortunately, a lot of those haven't really come to fruition. I mean, like, what was the physics guys? Agea?
Agea, yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. It was money well spent. Then they did Icera
Mhm.
for modems. They laid off everybody there after buying it and trying to get that to work after a couple of years. And so, I guess probably their most successful acquisition was the $70 million that they paid for a bunch of 3DFX patents and getting some people to work there and just, all the stuff that they bought, that $70 million, they've been able to probably integrate some of that technology into their graphics cards throughout the years and relied on those patents. And that was probably the best thing they ever bought. I probably am forgetting something here. I think there's like a multimedia company that they bought down in Fort Collins, Colorado, that they still do some stuff with. But anyway, regardless, why Mellanox? Well, they're a group that actually sells very high-end networking parts. So not only just Ethernet, but also InfiniBand. And if you look at any of the top 500 supercomputers, half of them are probably powered by Mellanox products. And so what they do is they have these massive switching chips that are incredibly fast and allow for very, very wide integration of multiple CPUs, machines with GPUs and all that. And so if we kind of look back and think about where NVIDIA is going, last year they introduced the NV switch, which allows, I think, up to 12 GPUs to be supported on a dual processor system. We don't know how long it took them to develop that chip. We don't know how flexible the technology is, but it uses NVLink. But NVLink may only go so far. And if they want to get into these massive data centers and they want to get, thousands of GPU cores all running together, you need to have high-speed communications. Now, the other buyer that was interested in Mellanox was Intel, and they lost the bidding war, but they may not have been as excited to purchase Mellanox because of the couple of Ethernet high-end component makers. Intel is probably number one. I mean, if you look at all of their networking chips, they're featured in servers as just kind of the default product, especially at the high end. And so if I imagine some of the antitrust watchdogs were really, really paying attention to this, because if Intel eats up Mellanox, then there really is only kind of one major supplier of these high-end communication chips for supercomputers and other applications. And so NVIDIA paid $6.9 billion for this. And not only did they pay for it, but they paid for it in cash. It wasn't just like, hey, Mellanox shareholders, here's an X amount of NVIDIA shares that we're just kind of giving you to take over this. And so everybody's happy. No, they took cash reserves and they just paid for it. So it's going to be kind of interesting. I mean, if you think back a couple of years ago, AMD bought SeaMicro, and there's some debate about how much Freedom Fabric has been implemented in AMD's Infinity Fabric. Some people, claim that it's part of the hypertransport. Others are saying it's kind of ripped directly from there. I think it's probably a mix of the two. That they used a lot of the basis for the Freedom Fabric and hypertransport and got it all kind of working together. I mean, this is just, alchemy, I guess, to me, and I'm babbling here. But I think there is a lot of basis in the Freedom Fabric and Infinity Fabric. And AMD has got a really interesting collection of CPUs coming out this next couple of quarters with their 7-nanometer parts, and how they have, distributed the chiplets and the IO chips, and all of this is connected via Infinity Fabric. And I'm wondering if NVIDIA didn't kind of see this and say, you know what, we really need much more robust, faster, connectivity in between multiple GPUs for the data center, and perhaps even for consumer cards in the coming years, just because Moore's law is essentially dead. It's been forever to get from 22 nanometers down to 7 nanometers, and we still have only got a handful of parts running at 7 nanometer. And that train has just slowed down so much that the need for high performance computing continues to grow, but the ability to provide enough big chips to fulfill this is really tough. I mean, look at Intel. I mean, they're large Xeons. They're super supply constrained. They just can't send enough. There's you order something from Dell and you can expect multiple weeks before you get that order fulfilled. And a lot of these big OEMs are not happy, and they're starting to try to push the AMD EPYC parts as well. But until AMD really gets their 7-nanometer parts out there, I think a lot of people will just continue to wait for the Intel Xeons. But again, these are just massive, massive chips, and they can't make enough of them. And if you look at how big these chips are coming from NVIDIA, they've got the same problem. I mean, they I mean, right now demand is not great, but if it were better, it's just harder to make these big chips. And so having a robust communication inter-chip and inter-machine or inter-system or inter-node communication is going to be very, very key if they want to continue to grow in the data center and provide parts for this. I don't know what I've been rambling on here for minutes now, and what do you guys think?
So, I mean, I don't know a lot about the history of NVIDIA's enterprise initiatives or anybody's enterprise initiatives, but looking at it, I think you pointed out too, Josh, that from a business perspective, unlike some other acquisitions that Intel and others have made, they're buying a going concern here. They're buying a company that has revenue that's going to immediately contribute to the bottom line. So right off the bat, from that sense, it's not, that's a factor at play. And then looking at just the story from my perspective, the last few years is just the convergence of these older, bigger companies. You've got Intel moving into graphics. You've got AMD reasserting itself in enterprise and desktop. You've got NVIDIA moving into the enterprise. So this is just another part of that story as these companies look to engage each other on multiple more novel fronts.
No, I think you've kind of nailed it. I mean, it's not only is it a company that's shipping product, but yeah, it's going to have a positive impact on their bottom line, in the coming quarters once they finish the acquisition. And so unlike with the Icera buy, they bought the company. There wasn't a product that they really could sell, but the technology was there. They thought that, hey, the sky's the limit with this, with the programmability of these modems, and it turned out to be not the case. I think they released one part that had an Icera modem attached, and nobody bought it. But yeah, it's there's a lot going on here, and they're really looking forward to the future. And to have that kind of R&D development in these massive arrays that high-speed networking communication, it's going to have some positive effects on products in the future. We don't see anything integrated like Infinity Fabric here until at least 3 years down the line, if not a little bit longer. But the potential is there. Because remember, Infinity Fabric is not just CPUs, but it's built into Vega. Mm-hmm. And we haven't seen the entire, so far that Infinity Fabric has been used primarily for, the Zen chips with the integrated Vega graphics, but we don't know how that's going to, advance as the future comes down and AMD attempts to, get more into, with their graphics into high-end computing.
So chiplets everywhere.
Chiplets everywhere. It's the only way to fly.
All right. Well, let's jump into the news. We've got a number of stories this week. So a lot of them sort of related into things gaming and Microsoft. Some of it good, some of it weird. First off, we've got something we thought we'd never see. Scott wrote this up for us. DirectX 12 on Windows 7, sort of, by way of World of Warcraft. So what happened here is, obviously for years, Microsoft told us DirectX 12, just like Internet Explorer was a core part of the operating system, DirectX 12 was a core part of Windows 10. It just couldn't happen. You couldn't do it on earlier operating systems. But here we have parts of DirectX 12, certain layers of DirectX 12 being introduced into Windows 7 through the World of Warcraft client. If you're running a certain version of the client, it will enable DirectX 12 performance if you have the compatible hardware, obviously, on Windows 7. So what do you guys think about this?
All I can say is, wow.
I need a soundboard with a rim shot, but
yeah. Anybody else have any gems like that one?
I was discussing this with Scott, but I feel that I don't think this is a full DX12 implementation running on Windows. I have a feeling it's kind of like mini GL back in the Voodoo days. That wow, World of Warcraft is they probably runs DX12, but it probably doesn't have nearly all the calls that the entire implementation does of DX12, and so it could be a little bit more basic. And they probably just pushed all their development and said, hey, we're going to do DX12 up and down let's talk to Microsoft. Maybe there's a way for us to get this done. And so, yeah, I don't think it's a full DX12 implementation. It just is kind of a mini GL or mini DX12 that we've seen in the past that, is less complex, easier to implement, and probably a little bit more transportable. I don't know, but I'm not a software guy, but that's what it kind of seems like to me. Scott said, didn't think so, but who listens to SCAD anyway?
Yeah.
SCAD.
I just like how it's so perfectly timed for the arrival of the NAG screens for Windows 7 users.
Oh, right.
They're going to try that again come the end of the month.
Yeah.
You really should be moving up to the Windows 10 experience. You're making Cortana cry. And we're taking your DX12 away. Haha.
Does Microsoft still acknowledge Cortana? I mean, haven't they been really downplaying that?
Have you installed
in the
Windows
same
10?
way of
maybe?
IE11.
Well, I mean, from their marketing and everything, I thought that was one of the things is they kind of started pulling back from the Cortana pushing.
Every
now
re-imaged computer.
Yeah, you install Windows 10, and the
she
first
pops
thing that
up at
comes
the right. Yeah, that's for
very beginning. Hi, I'm Cortana. Do you want to use and abuse me?
Hey, why do you hate accessibility? Huh?
Well, they're certainly not pushing it as hard
It's easy.
for connected devices like they had been.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, the Windows experience is still all about Cortana, which still runs endlessly, even when you disable it. But my question about this is, like, I'm kind of wondering how it's going to be handled from the graphics driver standpoint. Like, you're not just going to suddenly have these like DX12-ish features on your existing graphics drivers, I imagine, unless, like Josh said, it's just like enhancements that are just they come down in a patch to the game. But
Yeah, that's
I'm
a good
sure it'll be
point.
glossed over. It'll be like, whatever Wickle driver adds support for new features with World of Warcraft, whatever expansion. But
Yeah.
it's just very odd.
I mean, it's just like the mini GLs in the past. They would intercept the calls and translate them into something that the graphics card would be able to handle. And I wonder if it's just kind of a little sandwich of software in the stack that does that exact same thing. And so Windows 7 thinks, hey, you're running DX9, DX10, whatever, and or DX11 it does work on 7, right? I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they could just be converting those into calls that the DX11 can handle. I don't know. I mean, it's from a developer's standpoint, you would want all of your software development under one DX and not have to worry about all the other versions, but you're going to have support from Microsoft and to be able to implement that effectively. So it would be interesting to hear the entire story from both sides.
Yeah. So we're not sure how this will all play out, but just to reiterate, this doesn't mean you can go and enable DirectX 12 in Windows 7. If this comes to you, it's going to come to you built into specific games that have been changed or modified to support this with Microsoft's assistance. So it's interesting for sure. The implications remain to be seen. But here's something that's just awesome and overdue, and that is Halo, the Master Chief Collection, coming to PC. Microsoft had an announcement earlier this week where they had an event earlier this week where they made the announcement. And obviously, the Master Chief Collection is 4 years old. It's been around on Xbox for several years now. It had a controversial launch because a lot of the multiplayer features were broken at launch and took them a long time to fix it, but they stuck with it. And I don't play it a lot myself. I haven't played it myself personally in several years, but my impression is that they've really done a great job, and people seem to think the current state of the Master Chief Collection is pretty good. And so to see it come to Windows, this has been rumored for a long time. There was no technical reason why they couldn't do it. It was just a matter of timing. And it's not only coming to Windows, but it's coming to the Windows Store and to Steam, which is people, whether it was intended to be or not, people are positioning this as a slap back at Epic and the Epic Game Store, which is all about gobbling up these exclusives and then selling your information to the Chinese government. No, I'm just kidding, sort of. So there's this pushback of, hey, we're Microsoft, Phil Spencer's on stage, everyone loves him. He's so open and cooperative, and here we are. We're gonna have this key franchise of ours come to both Windows Store and Steam. We just don't know the exact date. We know that it's gonna trickle out sort of game by game. My impression is you're gonna buy the collection, and then you'll get the games as they become available. And the order that these games are gonna come out in is, let me pull that screen back up here. It looks like it's gonna be Halo Reach, then Combat Evolved, which was the first one, Halo 2, Halo 3 ODST, but just the campaign, Halo 3 and Halo 4. And of course, these games, some of these games have already been on PC. Halo launched on PC alongside Xbox, as well as Halo 2 as a Vista exclusive. Another game that Microsoft claimed required Vista. You had to upgrade to Vista to get it. And then we've had Halo 5 technically on PC via the Forge thing, but the code was running. So not entirely first year, but to have it all officially out at once, I think is exciting. What do you guys think about this?
I can finally play Halo 2 on my PC again
Without having to pull out the
I never
Vista
got
key?
in on the original Vista thing. I kind of saw it advertised and saw it in Walmart once, and yeah, never picked it up.
Usually decade-old games show up on GOG.com for pennies, but at least we have the digital distribution of, is there as much of an online community for this anymore, or I never played Halo games, so I'm probably shouldn't even be offering any kind of opinion here.
Well, Halo was everything in my early college days when we all had Xboxes in our dorm rooms, and like that's what we played. That was the Fortnite of the day, Halo multiplayer. And yeah, I don't know if this is going to capture the group of kids, the Fortnite esporter kind of group that dominates the markets now, but there's probably a market of people, my age, around, or older gamers who this is going to hit that nostalgia feeling. I don't know how long it'll last, how well it'll compete. Online gaming has changed a lot since original Halo multiplayer online, in terms of types of games and just communication and coordinating your team and game modes and all that. So I don't know, but if they don't introduce any kind of crazy monetization and it sells for a good price and it runs well, I mean, I think it's not going to take over Fortnite or Apex or anything, but it's good to see.
A lot of people are going to get it because they want to redo the whole warthog jump thing with the grenades.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that
was the
video?
only fun thing.
Well, I can get my
breaking the physics
Logitech MX518 out and play a little bit.
Wait, the
You're
new
going
one or
way
your
retro.
classic one?
Yeah,
Well,
the
my
new one will be a little bit too sensitive.
Well, you can adjust it. Unfortunately, my original died and I tossed it a few years ago, unfortunately, but I got the new one, so.
I've still got one in the shelves behind me.
Yep.
Yeah, we saw
there.
Jeremy drag the carcass out last week or 2 weeks ago to show us. But all right, so be on the lookout for that. That's the Halo Master Chief Collection coming to PC. It's going to be Windows Store and Steam. Next up in news, we've got something we alluded to last week. We were talking about the Windows update KB4482887. Which was the Retpoline optimizations intended to improve performance by regaining performance that had been lost in some of those Spectre 2 mitigations. And unfortunately had a side effect where it significantly degraded performance in certain games and certain applications. And so Scott wrote this up for us a few days ago, and then just kind of, I think it was today, wasn't it? Or maybe it was late yesterday or today, Microsoft released another update, KB4489899, which fixes the problems introduced by that previous update. So if you had installed that update and were seeing these problems, check for updates again and check this out to get the fix. And I never saw these. Was anyone bit by these? Did you guys experience these performance degradations that are being talked about?
I think I did in Dirt Rally 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
When going full screen, you'd get some extreme choppiness and slower rates and what you really should. So yeah, I think that that and a couple other what was another? Resident Evil was one that when you updated to that, and even if you had the latest drivers, it would show that would be, running like 102, 105 frames per second, but it just felt so choppy. The micro stutters and everything were there. And it was just, it was not great. I mean, still looked great, but it didn't feel great.
Yeah.
So I kind of slowed down on my GPU testing until we can get this stuff kind of figured out.
Well, and so if you were bit, go check and grab that update. I didn't see it happen, but I saw reports like Josh said that it seems that those were the experiences. And this update, every person who said they installed this update, either on Twitter or Reddit, reported that the issue was solved. So it sucks that it had to happen, but it looks like Microsoft did fix it relatively quickly. So that's good.
Yay, Microsoft.
All right. Next up in news, we've got some stories about AMD's upcoming GPU launches. Sebastian wrote this up for us based on some reports over at WCCF Tech, right?
Yes, and not a lot there, but the interesting part was that they had said that partners are the ones saying that they expect it to launch, as he put it, exactly a month after the Ryzen 7 nanometer launch, which, based on the previous rumors, speculation about the Ryzen launch, we've already been told it's mid 2019. So just guessing, 7.7 seems like a pretty nice number for a 7 nanometer CPU launch if they wanted to be clever, but that would place this at around August. So possibly even earlier, depending on when they launch the Ryzen 3000s. But my thinking is, if this is actually coming from board partners who often have information before press or anybody else, then we will probably start seeing the endless parade of leaked box art and different renders and product photos from videocards.com soon enough. So it's just going to follow the usual timeline of all GPU. Like the rumors begin very early, and then they start to get followed up with spec leaks and pricing leaks, and then stores in Europe that have it listed a month early and all that kind of stuff. So it's very early days, but it is interesting that the WCCF Tech, who said they had the exclusive on this, they may have actually been fed this by somebody either at AMD or from one of AMD's partners. So, but as I said, we have to wait for it to pan out.
Right. And sort of similar or related to that, I should say, is another news story we had, which is maybe we have some data about some of these Navi GPUs, some interesting results of a cleverly named GPU classification in some benchmarks. It's labeled in the benchmark 66AF:F1, and it showed up in some Computech, was it CompuBench and graphics benchmark results, right, Jeremy?
It was more compute. We didn't really get any look at graphics. I mean, if you flip over to the graphics tab from that one, as I slowly bring up GFX Bench here, and so that they ran Aztec Ruins, which is a fairly basic one. But when you scroll down a little bit further, you start to see some of the other ones like Manhattan on and off screen, T-Rex, and a couple others, what puts it, a bit better than the 580, but not really keeping up with what the computes we've been seeing on NVIDIA's cards now. So it lends a good amount of
credence.
That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. That's the one. Clearwater. To the rumors we're hearing that they're going to lead with something very, very mid-range, which, is becoming a nice and crowded marketplace right now, which is kind of good to see for those people that can't blow $500 on a graphics card, let alone 12, as seems to be what's expected nowadays. I do also love the fact that they didn't bother doing the Bitcoin test because, well, no one really cares so much anymore.
Well, data is good, even if you're not going to use that data. I mean, having it as a comparative or for purposes of comparison would be handy. And who knows what crypto nonsense will happen next.
It doesn't seem like it's a big shocker that, we're not going to see it as early as some people had hoped. A lot of people were thinking maybe Q1, Q2 release, and yeah, it just doesn't seem that way. We haven't heard of major orders, and well, I mean, there's orders, but we have no idea when things are actually going to be delivered, and everybody's keeping pretty tight-lipped. But yeah, they need to come out sooner than later, but I think it's going to be later. Then again, they've got a ton of inventory to get rid of.
Yeah, everyone does right now.
Yeah,
But at least Ryzen 3 looks like it's going to be on time. So, you know, if this is a little bit later, still not horrible. But come on, guys, get it out.
Well, get it out when it's ready. That's don't get it out if the drivers aren't there and the optimizations aren't there, and then the first round of benchmarks all turn out to be a disaster. But
Well, you know, Jim, great artists ship.
is that what the quote was from Jobs? Was it great
I think
artists?
so.
Okay.
No, I think that was
Yeah,
from
I
Tumblr.
thought it was great artists steal, but
That was Bill Gates' argument.
oh, okay. All right.
It's like
I don't
we
know.
both broke into the same house, and you broke in to steal the TV, but I'd already been there, or some nonsense like that. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, based on everything we're seeing, Navi will be a mid-range launch initially, most likely. So keep expectations in check for that. Don't go expecting an RTX 2080 Ti killer.
That's
at
not
least out of the
exciting,
gate.
Jim. We don't want another temper your expectations, because the new GPU architecture that you've been waiting for what, 2 years now is going to come out, and it's going to be underwhelming. But we're going to hit price points. That kind of stuff they need more than that. Like Radeon 7 showed that AMD can absolutely compete as long as the software and driver support is there. The hardware itself can compete right up there with similarly priced NVIDIA hardware, and it really depends on the game. Like Far Cry 5, Ash's Singularity, everyone's favorite AMD benchmark. But if there's any kind of Radeon optimization at all, that card does quite well. It's just ridiculously priced. Both of them coming out with $700 cards. NVIDIA and AMD has created just a ridiculous high end to the high end market, but AMD has no answer at $500. There are $400 Vega 64s out there that are a very good card for that amount of money, but other than great deals on a Vega 56 that are fleeting, one week it might be $269 or $279. The next week, the cheapest one I can find is over $400. So, and then it drops significantly down to the RX 570, 580, and at least the 590s are coming down a little bit. I actually saw one today for $239, so that's not bad for the RX 590. But there's a big hole there where NVIDIA just seems to be wanting to fill up the product stack, where they came out with the GTX 1660 Ti after launching the RTX 2060 to have cards like at that 349 price range and the 279 price range, and they still have a bunch of Pascal cards out in the supply chain.
I just hope that Navi scales a whole lot better than Polaris and Vega has, because once I start getting up to all those compute cores, TDPs just get really high. The heat that comes off of those, even if you're undervolting, it's still just not as good as what NVIDIA seems to be able to do with their architecture. So I'm hoping that Navi is a little bit more scalable and a little bit more efficient. But I mean, Vega 7 nanometer was okay, just not great in terms of, especially, TDPs and scaling. I mean, sure, it was fast in certain things, but yeah, it, you expect a 7 nanometer part with 1 terabyte per second of memory bandwidth of 16 gigs to really just tear things up. And it was competitive.
Yeah, it's like they said on their slides. It was supercharged Vega. They took an aging GPU and they supercharged it, so you're getting significantly better performance than the stock. But it's like with the car, I mean, you're limited by the engine to some extent. You can tweak it and mess with the computer and port polishing and
Get out and push.
weight reduction. Well, yeah, get out and push.
Yeah.
But
Anyway.
Well, we're all going to be spending more than we want on GPUs, is the lesson, right?
well, I mean, if you vote with our wallets, nobody buys a GPU, and then prices fall, and everybody wins.
Let's bring back board games.
Okay.
Remember board games? Actually, I think there's a
They're
number
coming
of
back.
boutique YouTube channels that have built their entire model around tabletop.
Everyone's
games.
favorite Star Trek character hosts one of these video shows about board games, I believe.
Wrong.
Shut up, Jim.
Okay, well, let's continue on with the news. I'm sorry. Will Wheaton seems like a good human being. I just don't like his presentation style. Leave it at that. Continuing on with the news, more gaming news and some more stuff involving storefronts and nonsense. But Phoenix Point, which was an anticipated crowdfunded, and not just crowdfunded, but funded through Fig, which is a like legit investment platform, not just like Kickstarter, but like there were terms and requirements and other legality. I've never done it myself, but it's a higher tier of funding for projects. So this was a game. It's from the XCOM creators, or one of them, and it's a similar style sort of sci-fi tactical shooter. Funded a couple years ago. Yes, the original.
To the newer versions.
Yeah. And funded a couple years ago with, my understanding is, the promise of providing backers with Steam and GOG keys upon release. And then this week they come out of nowhere. I guess they had delayed the game a couple times, or there'd been some announcements that indicated things weren't going to plan, and they came out.
They had some stretch goals they didn't make. Like there was an underwater base and a couple of other extra things that they had been pushing towards, and they just never met it. And then they had, as with every software programming team, they had a little bit of a kerfuffle. It wasn't major compared to some of them, but it did slow things down. And then they did this.
Yep, and this being that they came out and said, hey, we're going exclusively to the Epic Store for 1 year. So the game will launch. Epic gave them a bunch of money. They obviously also get the advantage of having the higher cut, 88% of sales versus 70% on Steam and other platforms. So they did this deal. It'll be exclusive on Epic for a year, and then the implication being after that year, they'll hand out Steam and GOG keys and distribute it elsewhere at that point. And they positioned it by saying, it's a good thing because the money from Epic lets us run the studio for a year. So all of our year one DLC is going to be free to every backer up till now, or everyone who backed or pre-ordered up till now is going to get a full year of DLC for free. And they seemed quite confused at the negative response, surprisingly.
Well, I mean, there's some of us that are still pissy about DLC. And not just day one DLC, but the idea of, okay, you paid for a game, and now we're going to start charging you extra for stuff that could have been in there in the beginning. And there's still some people like me that, unless you are adding what used to be like the $20 or $30 additional game, not 4 or 5 extra missions, but a whole damn new thing. That was sort of like, wait a second, so the stuff that should have been in there that shouldn't have cost me any more money is now going to come out, and you're guaranteeing the game ain't going to be quite done, at least in my opinion, but you'll give us the updates for free, a la a season pass that everyone else does. So, I mean, that miffs me. There was a couple of things about the original, and I'm still trying to think back, why it wasn't this one of the ones that I backed, because it was totally my sort of thing. And I don't remember what it was, but it was just something about the Fig campaign that just struck me as a little bit, wait and see what happens. And I'm kind of glad that I did. I mean, the Epic Store might be decent, but there's no support for Linux. The search function is horrible. Loading pages is just freaking nasty because they're not loading like a little small one with optional videos. It's just this huge long page, like a PR post for, a full-blown motherboard or something. And it just, I'm not a big fan of you guys doing this. Adding it to saying, hey, we're also going to release it on Epic, and if you go to the Epic Store, the stuff that we might be charging you for on Steam or GOG will be free if you're a backer. There are ways you could have done this a little bit better off than, by the way, you have to go here. And if you're really, really snooty, well, they are at least offering you refunds, so you can get your money back and have nothing.
They are, although I've been following the kerfuffle on Reddit, on their subreddit, and apparently they're not just refunding you through the means with which you initially donated or purchased. They're requiring you to go to a third-party payment processor, and it's a legitimate payment processor.
Yep.
But some people are saying, well, I gave you, I don't want to have to go and give this other person who I've never done business with my bank account information. You know, just give me the money back. And so then they started looking at chargebacks, and then people started getting their accounts banned. And and one of the PR managers called somebody who was pretty aggressive, but I don't think crossed the line. He was posting a lot of we'll say, shit posts about this, and the PR manager publicly called him a cockwaffle. So that was
interesting.
That was interesting. Yeah. So it's kind of a mess all over the place. And I get that that publishers want the money. I get that they want security. I am all for competition. I'm not thinking Steam is perfect here and that they should never be challenged. It's the way that this happened, and I'm not a backer in any regard. I hadn't even heard of this game prior to this happening. So from that perspective, I guess the whole, any news is good news kind of thing is paying out a little bit, but they're screwing a loyal fan base that actually put their money up, and they're doing it for money up front. But also there's this impression amongst all these games that seem to go to Epic that they want to get this user base, this fan base, these millions of people who are now tied to Epic because of Fortnite. But the misconception, I think, is these kids are on Epic because, and I don't mean to say kids derisively, I mean to say literally they're mostly younger, they're mostly minors. If you were to look at the entire Fortnite user base, the majority of them are probably under 18 years old, and they're using Epic because they have to play this one game that has currently captured their attention. They're not going to just migrate over to another game. It's not like they're normal users who you can tout as a user base or a readership or an audience. I don't see a game like this capturing their attention or being beneficial. So I don't know, but check it out. If you did back the program, go check out the terms, see if it's acceptable to you, and see if you can get a refund if you're not happy about it. But
to your point,
then we can wait for Bethesda to launch their store.
Right. So many damn launchers.
Jim,
Yes.
They don't even list below age 18, apparently. I don't know if you have to lie and say you're 18 to install and play the game or not, but looking at this snapshot of Fortnite players, which I guess I could have shared the link so you could have a visual here, but I'm posting that into the chat here, our internal chat. But 62.7% in 2018 of Fortnite players were in the 18 to 24 range, but that's the lowest range that they have in their demographics here.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that is like, I mean, you're right. That's huge. It's 2/3.
Well, look what it says right after that.
Oop.
Discounting under 18.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah.
Adults 18 plus.
Yeah, so that's juggling around your statistics really crappily.
Those
75% of our players are under 18, but that 25% breaks out like this.
Yeah.
That's just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and you just, I know statistics can be manipulated, and obviously it's hard to make assumptions because we're all sort of isolated in certain ways, but literally everyone I know who plays that game is under 18. Everyone I see online talking about it is under 18. Everyone I see on Twitch streams is under 18. It's and that's great. It's awesome to get kids into gaming and PC gaming in particular, but it's a game that is primarily targeted towards and popularized by children. That's just how it is.
Don't ask a question you don't want the answer to, Sebastian.
I know. I don't want to be accused of cock waffling, but
No.
I have questions about their demographics research and the Fortnite user base.
The one thing that I don't understand is I've got, just on my desktop, I've got Epic Games, I've got Uplay, I've got Steam, I've got
Origin,
Blizzard's thing, Origin, and it doesn't bother me that I have these different clients, but some people are just furious, and I don't understand. I mean, it's just, so what if they've got a different front end for the game that you play locally on your machine? It's just, I realize one-stop shopping is handy, but in this case, I think it has stifled a lot of competition. And getting a couple more out there. And sure, Uplay had its issues when it was first launched. It was a piece of crap, but now it's solid. All of these guys are solid. I mean, Origin works fine. It may not have the functionality that Steam does, but Steam has been out since 2004. But yeah, I don't understand the extreme hate, because not only do we have all those things, but we've got a separate Discord chat, and people run crap on Chrome, and I've got my IRC window up, and I've got my VLC player that plays video. It's not like I want all these things jammed into like a Chrome browser, because that would be horrendous.
Well, I think in Epic's case in particular, it's that the store itself, or the launcher, the ecosystem is significantly behind the competition in terms of features. It just lacks a lot of things, even things as basic as like download throttling, so that you can download a game in the background without it sucking up your online bandwidth while you're playing. Things like that. But also in particular, because of the Tencent investment, Tencent has ties to the Chinese government. The Chinese government, and this is not about Chinese people, culture, or ethnicity, this is about the actual Chinese government as it works in practice, is a totalitarian dictatorship. And the people have caught the Epic launcher doing suspicious things that it shouldn't be doing, logging data that it doesn't need, looking at processes on your computer that it doesn't need. It is doing things that I've looked around. No one can explain why the launcher does some of the things it does. That bothers me. That worries me.
That's my problem with all of this stuff. Well, one of them, you have all these different clients. Telemetry is just, it's everywhere. Every application uses it. Windows 10 uses it. Every time you're connected to the internet, there's information about your computer, information about what you do on your computer, what you're typing, or files you have saved in your computer that can be shared with Microsoft. So they're doing it with that, whatever, anonymous collection that they do. But then you have, what if I have 4 or 5 different clients that start up with a computer? First of all, to me, it's a performance issue and an annoyance when I've got all of these different clients chewing up CPU cycles unless I manually disable them at startup. If I don't have them all logged in and up to date, then that's an extra bit of annoyance, looking up like, what was my Uplay login again? I've got to remember that password. I've got to have that logged in. You can, one of the things that made it easier with Steam was I could tie these to Steam. Like, would you like to link your account with Steam? Oh, sure. And then I never saw it again. Like, I would launch the game. It would run the additional DRM client, but then I wouldn't really see it. I didn't have to interact with it. I didn't have to do like the stupid lounge thing. I think when Grand Theft Auto 5 came out, and there was whatever Rockstar's Lounge.
Social Club.
Really trying to Social Club. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to look at that once I linked my accounts. Although, God forbid you ever forget your password like I did. Getting through to a human being there is not easy to access your own account, and I couldn't play the game at all for a few days. When it's just like people use password managers to make their lives easier. It was nice to have just like one secure 2-factor authenticated Steam account, and then everything just loads and installs, and you don't have to worry about it. And I get that Epic is enticing developers with much more favorable returns, but how long is that going to last? Like, they're just trying to build up. They're building up on top of Fortnite, and they're going to ride this thing as far as they possibly can, and hope that when everybody moves on to the next big thing that may or may not be an Epic exclusive title, that they will have the customer base and they'll have the clout to just keep going, I guess, as a Steam competitor. But
that's exactly it. I think that's 100% it. They know it's not going to last forever, and they want to take advantage of it. I don't blame them for that. I just don't have to like it,
Who distributed PUBG? What was that? That was not an Epic game, was it?
No, that was through Steam.
So PUBG was what everybody was playing as far as Battle Royale, even, was it 2 years ago, year and a half ago? Mm-hmm. Fortnite came kind of out of nowhere and just became the next PUBG. What will become, it's like, it just seems like a fashionable sort of social network kind of a thing. And
now it's Apex Legends.
Well, they hope it is. Yeah. They hope that this initial surge has legs, but
this has the feel to me of that app that everybody at work is playing on their phones constantly, and every family member is playing it all the time. And then the next thing you know, you turn around and like, what are you playing? And it's like the next game that 60 million people play, Pokemon Go. And then it disappears basically, except for the ultra hardcore who still play it. So Pokemon Go, PUBG,
Flappy Bird.
Fortnite. Oh, yeah.
Now what? Battlefield 5 has a battle royale that's going to be coming out as well.
Oh yeah, I saw that today.
Yeah.
Fire Strike or something like that.
We've got to jump
Yeah.
on the Battle Royale bandwagon.
Anyway.
All right, well, let's move on to the next story before I say something else that's going to get me in trouble. But the next news item is Samsung has, if I can get the tab here, Samsung is rolling out eMRAM for the Internet of Things. So why don't you tell us about this, Jeremy?
Well, this is magnetic RAM, especially the embedded stuff, has been around for quite a while. But the thing is that it's almost exclusively been coming from Everspin. And for the most part, Everspin was using GloFo to make it, although they had a couple of other fabs that were doing it. So Samsung jumped in to say that they're actually working on a 1 gigabyte chip that they're hoping to be able to tape out, sometime later this year, which, is a fairly tight schedule as far as it goes. But this sort of opens up a huge chunk of storage space and cheap, not just cheap production, but it slurps energy just a tiny, tiny little bit. Not even a wafer. So it's not going to impact your battery life. It's not going to impact the overall amount of heat that's being produced by whatever Internet of thing that you're using. Except now you get vastly more storage space, and coming from Samsung, which, obviously they're going to like better than coming from a competitor. It also, they're talking because they've got ARM licenses that you might see ARM processors with eMRAM actually embedded on it, which, makes for a very interesting system on a chip. And we're not going to see it right away. It is going to take a little bit longer. And honestly, for me, there's more interesting memory technologies that I'd like to see developed. But for now, incredibly low power requirements, incredibly low heat, relatively cheap to make, and tiny, having that 100 gigs free on your phone could become very, very easy, and not at the prices we're seeing on some of the higher end iPhones and Galaxies that we are now, where if you're going above 64 gigs, you're paying an arm and a friggin' leg for it, and it's almost all what you're paying for is the memory. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes throughout the year, and is this actually going to come out as they're saying, or is taping it out by the end of the year just a little bit optimistic? Anyone else sort of interested in this, or is it just one of them things?
Local dense fast memory is always a good thing, but I don't know enough about that technology to comment on. But it's nice that we have other options that they are developing, because flash memory, especially the planar stuff, it's just it's a dead technology almost, and now we're all going to 3D VNAND, and this is just another jump that is seemingly necessary for the type of use cases. But yeah, I'd like to know more. Too bad we don't no longer have a nuclear engineer around here to kind of take us point by point.
Well,
Yeah,
it will be
got
cheaper
his-
than Optane.
I can call him if you want to wake him up. Oh, actually, no, he's playing Stellaris.
Wake him up.
No, he's still playing Stellaris.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Thank you,
Well,
Discord.
Speaking of it, even Paradox has got a bloody launcher. Paradox
do they?
Interactive made a store. Oh,
Oh,
God, yeah. And if you
geez.
buy the program from them, you can't put it on Steam. It's totally separate.
Huh. Man.
Yeah. Even they've done it.
Everybody should just shop at GOG. Standalone DRM free launchers. That's all you
I
need.
pray they
kinda
stay in business for a very long time.
Well, I've
Well,
bought
they're
their
charging
catalog.
$30 for Diablo 1, so yeah.
You've bought their you have every game. Is there
I
a
have-
package?
I have bought way too much from GOG. I don't know. At some point I should look up the total, but like, every time they have a sale and I go to the sale and it says in your library, oh, oh yeah. I
Is there
forgot about
anything
that.
I can buy? Can I give you my money?
It is almost, I mean, there's just something obviously I like.
I haven't bought Day of the Tentacle specifically for that, so that it's still there as something I haven't bought.
Oh, well, you're missing out.
The other things that I have.
Because have you played the remastered version at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, the remaster of that game is fantastic. Yeah.
It is. What game?
Day of the Tentacle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Way back.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's continue and finish up the news here. A very, very special birthday announcement to, well, the internet, but is it technically the birthday of just hypertext?
Well, it's the birthday of the original proposal for information management, written by Tim Berners-Lee, working out of CERN at that point, about how in the hell do we keep track of all of this freaking data, guys? It's scattered out a couple of different places. So we've got to be able to pull it from these remote areas, but in a way that makes sense and is readable and makes sense to a human. And for that, he came up with a much neater version of hypertext than we ended up with. I've got to say, the original one had what sort of become XML just embedded in it. It was part of the idea, was that it's doing version tracking. It's doing, but not just a link to the data that you're looking at, but links to the references that data makes, and or that the data relies on to make its point. It was really nifty, but as always, there are certain things that you've got to do and compromises that have to be made to be able to push it out. And so it took, the better part of a year before they built a program that could actually read it, which if you go to the article or post that I wrote, there's actually a link to a virtual machine that they've put up on a webpage where you can actually take a look at what the original ideas from him were. So it's interesting, and I mean, if you do know more about the great series of tubes than the average person, this is something that's really, really interesting. For everyone else, it's just like, oh yeah, the web, it's old. Remember AOL?
Isn't it amazing? It was all developed on Next.
Yeah,
Steve Jobs. He helped invent the internet.
That bastard.
I know.
Where does Al Gore come into this?
But the long story, he's the algorithm in the middle of it.
Oh, okay.
Yes. But the sort of one of the things that came up.
I hate you.
You should. You really should. But he also released a document, on the 12th, yesterday, sort of talking about what happened to his kid, and good Lord, would you people stop being so horrible to each other? It's, it's sort of like, any other parent looking around after 30 years and going, the kid's into link baits and, business models that purely just thrive off of doing horrible things. And, if I can say it, people just generally being cockwaffles to each other. So he sort of asked politely if you might consider stopping, or at least thinking before you start spouting stuff out. Because as much as it might seem funny to you, as we've all seen, that there are some negative effects that happen to a lot of people, and not just the vulnerable, just about to anyone.
But has it all been worth it? Do the pros outweigh the cons in the end?
God, no. People have to watch us now.
If
they never invented this, we wouldn't have.
Well, but they have a choice. They can just turn off YouTube and go watch another video.
You don't have a choice. There's no choice.
Oh,
this is mandatory viewing.
This is the state party network.
We control the vertical. We control the horizontal.
I know in Jim's foil-lined underground bunker, he doesn't see much of the outside world, but legislation was passed early this year, and now PC Perspectives podcast is mandatory viewing.
Interesting. The viewership numbers do not align with that set of facts. I'm gonna
Of
have
the
to
viewers
file.
18 and over.
Yes.
Yeah, it's those
Yeah.
minors, Jim, that you're not tracking. But please don't start, because that could result in entirely
Yes,
different
that's-
legal problems.
Of
for
course,
yourself.
of course. Well, let's sort of bookend the show with the final story here, which is sort of a partner to the initial thing we talked about, which was Sebastian's review, and that is that they have launched another case as well. And why don't you tell us about this?
Well, yeah, they sent both of them. I did not have time to get to both, so this is in lieu of a day one review, which will be coming soon. But it's kind of Corsair's answer to like the Define series of cases from Fractal Design, and this is still a very expensive case at $200. I will have to look at it and decide if I think it's worth that kind of a premium over something like a Define R6. But this has the noise damping everywhere, like the top, the side, the front, and it's built for silence.
Wow, look
Just like-
right next to it. Scroll up a little bit. Look, it's the NZXT H500.
That's some good.
Mhm.
That's some good Amazon algorithms right there.
Way to go. It's not similar at all to what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Well, tempered glass cases kind of all start to look the same when they're mostly made out of tempered glass. But yeah, solid front panel. Although this one opens and actually does have an optical drive, like the R6. Now, the R5 from Fractal Design had 2 optical drives, dropped it down to 1 with the R6. This has 1. Very similar in many ways, actually, to the R6. It does have the nice hinged door, which the R6 does not have. But like I said, this launched alongside the 680X and is on the opposite side, where it's all about noise reduction, does not have RGB fans, a lot more understated looking. And I will just have to decide and let the readers decide if it's worth the $199 price tag, which is pretty steep.
We should clarify
Or
too. I don't think we specifically said this is the Carbide Series 678C case.
Yes.
And even though they should wait for your review, is this shipping today as well?
Oh yeah, yep. This and the 680X went on sale today. This at $199, the 680X at $249. So they are being very aggressive with that high end of the market. I wonder how much the departure of Case Labs from the scene has kind of left this like really high margin, high priced enclosure segment up for grabs. And they're certainly populating it, at least from the 680X standpoint, with a really high quality, big spacious case, kind of like a Case Labs case. Although, of course, Thermaltake offers some similar kind of dual chamber designs for less money, depending on what you're looking for. But yeah, another premium entry from Corsair today.
All right. And before we jump into the picks of the week, Sebastian, did you want to get something in there real quick?
No, what?
No?
What do you what?
The
You're-
NVIDIA GT.
You have no pick of the week in our show notes.
Oh no. I don't have a pick.
Okay. All right. So,
Didn't even think about it. No, don't worry about it.
all right. So I'll start with mine then. And we've been picking a lot of Humble bundles recently, but that's just because there's been some pretty awesome Humble bundles. So this time it's the Strategy 2019 bundle. And it's got a number of games at any price tier, I think. So at the $1 or more, you can get Ashes of the Singularity Escalation, Niche, a genetic survival game, which is something I hadn't heard of, and Throne of Lies. So I'd buy that probably for the Ashes alone. Haven't tried
One of the greatest
others.
games ever made, obviously.
Hey! Don't get
That
sarcastic.
other game though, I'm sorry to cut in, but that other game, kind of a niche title, but it does have its fan base.
Again, that's twice this episode. I could have used the instant rim shot, but maybe I can do it in post. But anyway, moving up to the average price, which as of right now is at $8.91, you get Off-World Trading Company as well as some DLC for that and Dungeons 3. And then here's where it gets interesting. At $9, you get Stellaris, which is, as of today, if you were to buy this on Steam, is still $40. Now, there's $150 worth of DLC that you don't get with this, but at least you're getting the base game, for $9. Plus Plague Inc. Evolved, which I've only played Plague on mobile. I've never actually played the PC version, so interesting there. And then at $15, you add on Civ 6. Again, just the base game, none of the pricey expansions. But if you don't have them, that's quite a deal. $15. And for Stellaris and Civ alone, even for Stellaris, if you don't, I know Jeremy likes Stellaris. This is worth it if you haven't tried it. So check that out. That's quite a deal. That's one of the better values I've seen if you don't already have those games.
Did you pick it up? Did you buy the bundle?
I did not, only because I already own half the games, including the big ones, Stellaris and Civ. So they got me at full price. But if I didn't, I would have bought it. Next up, Jeremy's got something interesting. I saw this earlier this week. Why don't you tell us about this?
So I honestly didn't know that they were even developing this, but I saw it. And the first thing I thought is, well, shit, we've all got those friends and family members that FTP is some bizarre arcane thing, which is not possibly even conceptualized. Dropbox is confusing. And when they try and email you that 1 gigabyte file that you asked for, it doesn't go through for some bizarre reason that they're frustrated about. This, and I tested out, is just stupidly easy. You literally drag the file, you drop it. They can grab it for a couple of days, and after that, it's gone. If you sign in, because you've got a Firefox user, and you link it to this, up to 2.5 gigs, just stupidly easy to do. So this is great for when you're trying to pry that error log out of someone's hands, or they're really desperate to show you the save game that they want you to load up, or whatever. It's just ridiculously easy, and you don't have to worry about it. Well, in theory, you don't have to worry about it hanging around on the web forever. Not looking at you, Dropbox, suddenly restoring things that were deleted 5 years ago.
And this is, just again to clarify, this is Firefox Send is the service, and it's at send.firefox.com. There's a number of services that do this, that sort of provide like quick, easy, one-time or time-limited file transfers. I think Firefox or Mozilla is the biggest, most reputable company to offer this thus far, as far as I've seen.
Well, and honestly, you send them the link, and they drag and they drop it, and they're done.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to sign in. They don't need to figure anything out. They're not getting a prompt saying, your experience would be much better if you installed our client, sort of thing. It's there. It's done. It's easy. Yep.
Awesome. So check that out. It's Firefox Send, and it's free, as if we hadn't made that clear. So Josh, you're up.
Me. Back in 1998, I got a demo of what looked like a really amazing looking 3D game, and I played it. I think it came in on one of the boot discs, Boot the magazine, before it turned into Maximum PC. And it was Resident Evil 2. And I ran around in that, and I was amazed by the graphics, and except I didn't like, zombie games. And then they came out with this, kind of reimagining of it, and loaded that up. I got that for free when I bought the Vega 56, and I thought, well, this might be an interesting thing to use as a benchmark. And even though it runs extremely fast, it looks absolutely amazing. There are some parts when you're walking around, you think this is damn near photorealistic. I mean, there are things that will take away from that, like the shuffling zombies and whatnot. They don't look as good, but just the lighting, the shadows, the ambiance, the detail and just the environment is amazing, and it's a fun game to play as well. Cheesy story, but who cares? X gonna give it to you. You know what I'm saying?
Can't believe they're charging $80
get it
for
if
it
you're interested.
In
What's that, Jeremy?
They're charging $80 for it up here.
Boy, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just buy a video card.
Yeah.
It's cheaper in the long run, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't got a chance to play this one, but I've heard, this is a Capcom title, and I've heard that Capcom has had several PC releases in recent months that have been excellent. Good ports, good performance, all the options, field of view options, and all that you needed, and widescreen support, ultra widescreen, I should say. So Capcom, after a rough patch there for a while, seems to be hitting a few home runs recently.
Well, and I mean, I'm pretty sure that even with all their weird numbering schemes, there's about 89 Resident Evils out, and this is usually the one people refer to when they're talking about the pinnacle of the series.
Yeah. So a good title to pick up. And it looks like Sebastian has found something he wants to share with us.
I have. Well, Josh mentioned boot.
Is it boot or maximum PC?
Well, I have a number of these, but I have some.
Oh, nice.
As I slam into the microphone, some boot here. If you're watching the video live stream, you see me holding up a collection of these CD-ROMs and these cardboard sleeves. And I don't see the one that features Resident Evil. Is that what you're talking about, Josh? Which game?
Yes.
Was the demo? Okay. But I do see.
Lustomatic?
If you can see the Lustomatic. Pick the sexiest PC gear of the year with the insatiable Lustomatic, the high-tech intelligent agent that tells you what to buy and why. So what this actually has on it is a bunch of, they call them dishy demos. Apparently they have a sense of humor at bootnet.com. And Age of Empires, Close Combat 2, A Bridge Too Far, Conquest Earth Screensaver, Diablo, Dark Colony, Dark Earth, Dungeon Keeper, Hexen 2, Internet Board Games, Jedi Knight, Joint Strike Fighter, MDK, Need for Speed 2 SE, Rocket Jockey, Shadow of the Empire, Shipwreckers, Terracide, Pro Pinball Time Shock, and more. Megabytes of can't live without it utilities in this month's Workbench, built with Shockwave Flash.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's got the Macro Media logo on the back.
This is very sad. Oh wait, this is this is the maximum seed. It's not even boot yet.
No.
This is never mind.
That preceded
the earliest. No, this was let me see if I can't find it. Because I think unfortunately, my oldest boot disc is number 14. Panzer General 2, Outpost 2, Lords of the Realm, Siege, Fallout, Dark Colony, X-Car, Experimental Racing 3DFX. Wow. But yeah, number 14 was the earliest one that I had. And it wasn't until, then they turned into maximum PC. Oh, wait. On 15, I guess it was just Resident Evil right there at the top.
There you go.
Okay.
Wasn't even RE2. So anyway, my bad. Wow.
I have that one.
I have a lot
of the PC Gamer demos.
Oh.
As I drop Phantasmagoria against the microphone. So yeah, my pick is old, semi-useless, nostalgic PC junk, such as the complete PC upgrade and maintenance seminar in a box. This is Mark Manassi's 5 CD-ROM, 2 VHS cassette seminar to teach you about building, maintaining, understanding computer hardware technology, which is a $99.99 value for just $24.98 on clearance, probably 15 years ago somewhere.
Oh, Jesus! You have to drop it.
I mean, that was an accident.
It's a piece of history.
I just rolled with it.
They built them stronger back then.
Yeah, it's gone through a lot. I've still never opened it. This is a sealed box. One of our live streams, I'm sure, this year will feature me unboxing the Mark Manassi seminar to dozens of enthralled viewers.
All right. Well, thanks, folks, for joining us this week. If you are watching live, we're going to go off the air now so we can do that thing we can't talk about just yet. And if you are listening on demand, you've already heard it. So we hope we did a good job and informed and entertained you. But thanks for joining us. We record live normally Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. And now that we're on daylight savings time, that's 2 a.m. UTC. You can check us out at pcpro.com/subscribe to be notified. And I would say pcpro.com/live. That doesn't work anymore because of our new system here, but we're redesigning the website that should launch, I think next month is the target for the launch. So we'll see. And we'll have a new way to easily get to our live stream. Otherwise, just join us at YouTube on our live page. There's a notification when we start streaming. But we hope you all had a great week. I hope you all have a great week yet to come, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.